put a lot of energy into their branding, but so we kind of negated all of the red banding, and then we went through a process of removing as much paint below that red as we could. So you see down in the lower left-hand side, kind of the finished product. And a lot of that, even that light brick that you see now, has darkened up since this picture was taken, just because of dust and things that were remnants of it. But it's we wanted to be downtown. It was part of just contributing to the energy that Mason City has seen only increase in the last 10 or 15 years. And I think really we don't, and I don't think any of our staff regret the move. It's incredibly convenient for clients. It's convenient for lunch meetings, and we've increased our visibility.
Yeah, and I would maybe also just say that being not only designers for a project, but also our own clients, being on both sides of that relationship, moving downtown, it really helps us absorb and understand the balance, right, that every community, every client is trying to strike between what do we spend, what do we preserve, how do we stay viable, how do we just run our business on a daily basis. So all of those things, that really is what kind of historic preservation, renovation, and downtown development, it's a lot of those things, but a lot of times it's a balance. There's no one simple kind of silver bullet answer. So it's been an adventure. So I don't know if this was here.
So we're going to be talking a lot today about the Grand Avenue Historic Commercial District. Are you familiar with it?
That's okay if you're not.
Yes, it is very much okay. Well, good. At least everybody has heard of it. This is so far, yes. This is good for us to know. This information that we gather from these polling questions will kind of allow us to fill some voids if they exist, or expound on other topics if the knowledge isn't that fresh. So this is really good to see that the majority of people here are familiar with the district. Period of significance comes up on any project that embraces or looks at design guidelines. And period of significance is established when a district is listed on the National Register. So for the community of Spencer, we're looking at 1913 to 1935. There was a lot of impact in 1931 with the fire, so that kind of tells us maybe why things are the way they are, but it's that period of significance, that window of time that we look at when we develop guidelines, materiality, authenticity, and general aesthetic of the district. So really the district's been on the National Register for quite some time, listed in 2004. So really what the National Register does is makes the district eligible for things. National Register doesn't stop you from doing the worst thing possible to a building. But what it does do is make you eligible for certain avenues of funding. Usually on the state, and definitely on the national level, obviously, being on a National Register.
So when it comes to guidelines, which is what we're talking about today, why these things are important is because it helps focus resources and energy toward preserving a certain kind of focused effort. So I don't want to steal your collection metaphor, but
No.
So a good way, I'm going to call him Scoot. His name's Scott, but I always call him Scoot. So if that slips out, I'm still talking about him right there. A good way he put this is, if you're a collector of something, and maybe, you don't say I collect decorations. I collect Halloween decorations from the 50s and the 60s. That really just, it's kind of the same thing with the period of significance. It just kind of helps articulate and focus what it is you're doing, and where you can have concentrated impact. So that's why that's important. And when we talk about what is the district, so physically it is an actual boundary in your community. So we're looking at the blue graphic there, Grand Avenue going down, and then it's from 3rd Street to 7th Street. That's the actual boundary. So again, it goes back to where are we saying it's not maybe trying to be everyone for everything in the community, but where can we focus resources, efforts, time, and money to have an actual measurable impact within an area. So that's why when you designate a district, it actually does have a boundary to it. And it's not to say that maybe design guidelines that try to encourage different kinds of restoration and renovation can't happen outside that district, but what it is saying is within that district, that's the group effort that we're doing inside that district. And then within the district, even more, there's kind of levels of information or levels of different information. So key contributing structures here. So each one of these color fields is a building, is a property. So within the district, there's key contributing structures. So think about that, like, you know, if you're collecting your Halloween decorations, these are your really good finds, your really good ones that really articulate what it is your collection is all about. The contributing structures are then kind of secondary to that. They contribute to that period of significance, to the impact and the aesthetic that you're trying to preserve. And then there's certainly other structures within that district. Not to say that they're not important, they're just not necessarily aesthetically or historically contributing to the district. So that's what kind of makes up the puzzle pieces of the district. So, we got some votes already. That's totally fine. So when we talk about what is Spencer's district, what is important in there, when we talk about what we really want to protect and enhance in there, is it one thing? You know, we just kind of talked about buildings and architecture a lot. That's one piece of it. If you go to the poll here, if you click on each word or line, you can just use the arrows to move it up and down and rank it in your own opinion of importance. If we start talking about design guidelines, what is it within the district, maybe in addition to or above and beyond architecture, that you feel is important to enhance and protect? And if anyone isn't on the poll yet, the login is up at the top there again.
This is fun to see them
Mm-hmm.
move around.
Yeah, we would hope and expect that there's different perspectives here. So, you know, what this is telling us is, you know, we're going to be obviously talking about architecture a fair amount, but that's not the be all end all, really. That's just kind of part of it. Like we said, there's a lot of other things, and you can't really, when you're talking about development and enhancement and protecting, isolate any one of these things. They really all play together and should play together and enhance each other. And that's kind of one of the main takeaways we want you to have tonight, is that we're talking about guidelines that has to do with buildings, but really, if you zoom even further out, we're talking about that because we are trying to enhance the district in many ways. So is there anything maybe about the downtown, you know, this is a short list that we didn't put on here that anyone wants to throw out there or thinks that is missing from this list? All right, we nailed it. So this is, speak up if you want to at any point in time. We want this to be interactive. So this is good to see, and we'll save these results and capture this. And as we develop your guideline document, we don't want to lose sight of this. Obviously, pedestrian experience here up at the top. That's a big deal for you. And we're going to talk a little bit more, have a discussion a little bit later on in the presentation, the unique challenges that your downtown has with the main highway going through with traffic. That's maybe a different challenge that you guys have that maybe other downtowns do or don't have. So, and again, just to reiterate, there's lots of things that when we're talking about design guidelines and what we're really trying to do, economic development, bringing people to your community, retaining people, recruiting people, giving a place for people to visit, to want to come, to hold events. Really the constant through all that is your downtown buildings as a backdrop to all those experiences. So they may not be at the top of that list of maybe what you feel is important, but they really are there and help anyone living in, visiting, passing through your community form a mental image of what is unique about your community. That is what your buildings do. And preserving that uniqueness will give people something unique in their mind to think back to want to visit, to want to be a part of. That's really what we're talking about, preserving.
We're going to throw out these four words pretty regularly, and sometimes they get used interchangeably without intention. But just to kind of get a glossary of terms going in the conversation, preservation really is talking about maintaining what is existing and not letting it degrade, deteriorate, or be modified from its current state. Rehabilitation is kind of taking something back to what it was. You might unalter a building or remove previous alterations to retain and bring back some of that historic character. Restoration on projects isolates it to a period of time, often to date of construction, or in this case within the period of significance. And then reconstruction is kind of the last resort on project types like this, is to recreate components that were perhaps lost for reasons beyond control, or that they had been destroyed by a previous property owner. There's a little bit of desire to not recreate history in historic renovation projects, but there is also the ability to enhance other projects or other buildings so they kind of blend in with the district better than maybe what they had. So we'll try not to, even I will try not to use the wrong word, during these. We kind of joke and say that these are our 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, which I found out today originated to 1818. I didn't realize it was that old, but we actually use 3 R's and then add preservation into the glossary as well.
There's also renovation, which isn't up here. I guess the point is there's lots of terms when it comes to historic projects and buildings within a historic property or district, though sometimes these do have very specific applications. But I think a takeaway is when we develop the guidelines, those can apply to any of these types of projects. It's really not just for a property owner who is trying to rehabilitate their building or just reconstruct their building. It's really anyone who's taking on any type of building work that's happening within the district. We want to give guidance to how to do that.
Christy mentioned earlier that we would be talking about pride of place, and this is where we're really going to kind of focus on that topic with a few examples. But really, pride of place is kind of a momentum builder to really kind of keep the ball rolling and to generate enthusiasm, to capitalize on the assets that Spencer has and any potential assets that can be developed through a specific organization or a focus group that develops something. But it's what makes you stand out from other communities in Iowa, communities in the region, and it's what draws people to visit the community, what draws people to relocate to the community, both residentially and for businesses. It's kind of that opportunity to make a first impression. And I think we all know that first impressions make lasting impressions. So we're going to show you some examples of how 3 different communities have tackled this. This one happens to be Mason City, which is obviously where we are from. I happen to be born and raised Mason City, so I have seen this evolve over the course of my 46 years, not that I remember all of them, but 15 years ago, downtown Mason City was, I'll even rewind back to 20 years. Downtown Mason City was really nothing. What was down there locked its doors at 5 o'clock, and we just did not have any sort of activity after hours. The Frank Lloyd Wright Hotel that you see on the lower left-hand photograph there was in horrible, horrible condition, and at that time, the mall was still somewhat viable. Parking was maybe needed. The thought was that the building was beyond repair. The parking lot would be more valuable. A nonprofit group stepped up and started doing some stabilization work. They had to back off just because of their physical resources. They didn't have the energy to do it after completing Music Man Square, which is another attraction in Mason City. At that point, the building went up for sale on eBay with 0 interest. And that's when a grassroots effort locally started and said, we need to save this. We know what it is, and we know what it's going to do for the community. As that ball started rolling, the Vision Iowa program was in full effect, and Mason City was lucky enough to receive a large portion of funding from that, part of which went to the hotel, another part which went into the plaza development that you see in the upper right picture. So now we have retail open after 5 o'clock. There's a new restaurant that just opened in the last 2 or 3 months amidst everything else on there. So I think we've got 4 restaurants and a mix of retail right across from the hotel. And it has been a huge asset for the community. Well, let's exclude this year because of all things, everything that's been going on. But the hotel has drawn tourism from all 50 states and close to 90 different countries in total since opening. All 50 states every year bring tourists to Mason City. And after this happened, a sculpture walk was implemented in the community. So there's another component that draws people in. And really it has just been, it has really turned around the kind of the attitude of the community. There was a lot of negativity about it in the beginning, but once it was done and we saw the traffic, you saw license plates from all over the country in town, you realized that the effort was worth it.
Yeah, I think that helps punctuate the point that not even so sometimes we maybe assume people know this building in Mason City because it's so close to us, but this is the Park Inn Hotel by Frank Lloyd Wright, and it's the last hotel in the entire world surviving that he designed. So there are some buffs that want architecture buffs that want to come to our community and stay in, see, experience this property. So even though there's maybe not everyone even in our community that even knows or cares what this property is, why it's important, the effort that was put into preserving it and enhancing it benefits everyone. There's a whole basket of people and money that come to Mason City that didn't exist before this project. So I think that's a big takeaway. Even if you don't care about architecture or buildings, some people do, right? And some people care about that experience, and they'll come to your town and they'll spend money and they'll stay and they'll visit, and that's why it's important.
I'm going to add one thing back to that slide. So what she pointed out was my fault. I grew up with this. I've known it to be there for 46 years. I worked on it, professionally for almost 15. So it's normal for me. Yeah, we have it. I kind of probably don't promote it as well as I should when I visit other places. So I maybe kind of diminish it. And I think that's probably easy for some people to do when you've been in a community for so long. When we made our first visit here, we just kind of became enamored with things that you guys probably don't even notice anymore because we don't have them in Mason City. We don't see them in a lot of the communities, whether it's, little paved alleyways that are landscaped, really neat, or, buildings and businesses, and seeing how things have maintained or improved or grown. But I think sometimes it's the outside eyes looking at a community, see what you guys might glaze over a little bit. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I think there are things that we can, that's going to be an easy improvement for this building owner or for the community to buy into, and then everyone reap those rewards.
So Pella is another example that maybe people are familiar with, but just helps again make that point that their architecture, their buildings really help just punctuate the brand of their community, right? So again, not everyone maybe in the community cares or owns one of those buildings, but the collective effort that community or that district has taken to say, this is what we're doing, this is kind of what we're saying we're about and who we are, is the reason why people come there, stay there, want to be there, why they hold events that can kind of orbit around that brand. It's just a punctuated effort that they're rallying around. And any community can have that. So it doesn't always have to be about the architecture either. So this is Riverside, Iowa, which they have kind of self-invented this reason, who or why might any of us visit Riverside, Iowa on any given time. But they have kind of capitalized on this idea that this fictional character from Star Trek, right? Star Trek, Captain Kirk, who is a future character born in the future. His origin story is that he was born in Riverside, Iowa. So they latched onto that. They made it a reason and are expounding on that as a way to make events, have signage, have parades, give purpose to, again, it goes back to that pride of place that we're talking about. It doesn't have to always be the architecture. The architecture, the community is still the backdrop to those events, but they're putting an effort in saying, as a community, we're going to latch on to this and go for it and hope other people, and obviously it speaks to other people. It maybe doesn't speak to every one of them, but it is something that's unique to their community that gives people a reason to come there that they wouldn't have otherwise. So that pride of place, whether it's buildings, events, programs, it's all important, and it's really what we're talking about today. So when we talk about your pride of place, this is on the poll now. This is kind of if you've seen the Wordles, in one word at a time. If you want to type it, and you can type in as many as you want. Throw up some words there. What makes downtown Spencer unique? What is prideful to you about Spencer? Is it events? Vibrant, that's a great one. Just take a minute or so, and you can type in more than one word.
you probably just noticed what this graphic is going to do. You'll see some changes in the size of words, and that has direct relation to maybe how many times people have entered that, or kind of given their opinion as what makes Spencer so unique.
We're curious. What's Oh Boys? You don't. Is that a business or something? Oh, okay.
Oh, it's a specific pastry now. Okay. So our next meeting is at what time?
Oh, yeah. So,
Yeah, that boulevard is pretty impressive entrance from that end of the community.
so this is great to see. I mean, again, this is your unique community makeup. I mean, some of these words certainly, right? A lot of downtowns could say the same thing, but some of these certainly they couldn't. The deco architecture, the fire. I see fire up there. Is that an unfortunate event? Yes, but it is an event that shaped the kind of specific growth and change here downtown. So all of this is things that you guys can continue to pull out and articulate to people outside of your community what is unique about you, and that can be done through your buildings, through your events, through the kinds of businesses that you have. So this is great. We're going to incorporate this into your guideline document. So maybe just give a couple more seconds here if anyone wants to add anything else. Yeah, yep. So Scoot just mentioned, he whispered it, but I'm going to call him out on it. He mentioned that we like that occupancy is on there. I don't see that, but oh yeah. So that's a great one. Not every downtown has the benefit of filled storefronts. That's a great asset. That's a big challenge to some communities and some downtowns. So if you have that going, keep that momentum going. That's great. So if we don't capitalize on this uniqueness that Spencer has in their downtown, what then, right? So we've all been to many places, and there's a lot of towns that can look and feel just basically kind of generic. And not to say that, so this is probably just lots of towns, the edges of towns look like this. It's a product of the functionality and serving and the community. And a lot of towns look like this on the edges, but we certainly don't want the uniqueness of your downtown to ever disintegrate or spiral into a more generic type representation of a town, right? This is not what brings people to your community, what makes people remember your community, what makes them want to live in your community. This is a part of your community, sure, but it's not really what we're talking about today as far as preserving the uniqueness that is Spencer in the downtown. So, design guidelines, we keep saying this. What is it? What are design guidelines? So they're just that. They are guidelines. They're meant to be a tool when we talk about all of these things, right? The district, the pride of place, your uniqueness. It's a tool that your community can use to help kind of define and articulate what it is you're trying to protect and how you do that. And kind of think of it as a tool or a roadmap. And again, why? Why do you want this document? For a lot of reasons, to maintain the uniqueness, to help improve. I mean, a big one is property values, right? So, even aside from talking about historical fabric and the uniqueness of particular buildings, we also want to, help property owners that are next to other property owners, maybe not have someone come in and paint their building bright pink, two-story bright pink building, right? Like the guidelines are going to help focus efforts away from things like that and focus efforts toward something that is more of a big picture communal effort. And painting your building head to toe pink is a reality that has come up. So the guidelines help give reason to why you might not want to do that. And they also are going to be a document that helps give a roadmap to kind of best practices of what you can do to your building. That again is guidelines, but if you want to go kind of further for state or federal funding, like tax credits, for instance, our Lappner building, we're going for tax credits. There's things that you have to do then to get that funding if you want money in a historic district. So the guidelines start setting that tone locally to what you may have to do if you go further at a state or federal level. And protect your National Register distinction. There's lots of reasons why, right? All that stuff we talked about in the beginning is really why we're doing that. So an example here.
One thing I am going to add to Christy's comments is that this project specifically is funded either in part or in full by the State Historic Preservation Office. So they're going to be reviewing this document really before it's finalized. So to kind of touch on what Christy was saying, best practices, they're encouraging words on how to do it sympathetically and not detrimentally to the project. Depending on your funding source, if it's entirely private, and we're going to touch on this a little bit more, but once you get into a funding source where money is coming from a state entity, these guidelines kind of gently get you into that process. His state and federal tax credits, not necessarily such a gentle process, but the rewards are there if you Sharif, if you follow along and do it, by definition, the rewards do become bigger. So she touched on the next slide, and this goes back to my hometown again. It's a Valentine Diner. I think it dates back to the 40s, if I'm not mistaken. It's kind of been parked in the same spot in Mason City its entire life. And it has changed hands and ownership and really kind of started to deteriorate. The upper left picture is really before we did anything to it. It was part of a Main Street facade program several years ago, and that program definition has changed to a kind of a blight survey sort of situation. When Mason City took advantage of it, we were able to do things a little more holistically rather than specifically just with blight elements. But you can see in the upper left, the previous owners had kind of created this wood shack of an entrance because it opens up to a diner that seats 14 people, and that door right there really would just kill the atmosphere inside if it were too cold outside. As we got through the Main Street facade program, the lower left picture kind of shows you what we undid to the building and kind of recreated some of those elements. So the previous owners wanted it to be maybe appear more tall, so they thought vertical stripes were the thing to do. Coincidentally, those panels are vertical metal, and it became very easy to paint them that way. As we did the restoration, though, we went to the historic photographs and saw this horizontal kind of dimensional banding that you see. Obviously, the wooden shack was not original, so the puzzle became, how do we protect that front door a little bit from the elements? And the white screen that you see there was the direction it went at the time. The next owner or tenant decided to cover the building with really large words that include his menu. It actually got more intense than this, with some images as well, but the building was stable. It had been restored. Then that owner wanted to get out of the business, and without much effort at all, found new owners who kind of went even a step further and changed that front screen to clear glass so it's not as obstructive, and has cleaned up the entire inside of the building and has restored it. So it's this kind of a process, that Mason City is proud of. I think the owners are proud of it too. It hasn't been the easiest season for them for being new owners, but they are doing what they can to maintain a business. So
Didn't like Al Roker from Good Morning America come visit here? I
I think there are historic stories of, maybe pseudo celebrities, that would be in a hotel overnight that would probably dine there. But
Right. So again, it's just this is not something you find in every community. They could have still run their business in at the upper left kind of aesthetic and done okay, but because they fully went all in to being historically accurate, unique, mindful of what that property really is kind of supposed to be, that even further increases business and exposure.
that front screen that you see at the door does not engage to the main building. So that is a new component that can be taken away. Then you have an even more historic kind of visual of that building. So kind of maybe kind of take a mental snapshot of how you've seen like their signage on the glass on that entry, and maybe the lack of signage on the actual building. Neither of those is wrong. Neither of those are wrong, and they both work well for that owner. So sometimes it's little things that can happen that can really change the image in a big way. The next slide is a local example. I'm not sure how long ago this happened. 2 years. So you can see how awnings are a very common component in a design guideline, how they should their proportions and angles and things like that. But you can see how the change of a business in the same building with the removal of an awning really kind of just makes you look at it again a second time. And then the tenant of the building chooses a style of signage that really you see who it is, but you see beyond it and you see what's inside it, and it draws the customers in. So like I said, neither of these are wrong. It's just how some of these components can make a big impact. Yeah, the lighting across the top, kind of sympathetic, and historic in nature. I think there was some work done to the storefront as well. So you've got double entrance doors, which are nice for moms with strollers or carrying out large purchases, that sort of thing. But it was both of them were done well.
So there, you already have some kind of momentum and projects within your community that are going toward, kind of what the design guidelines want to focus on. It's your events too, right? So this, the people bringing people downtown, keeping people downtown, having people spend money, open their businesses, keep their businesses downtown. That's really what it's all about, right? So again, we've talked a lot about the architecture, but without all that effort, and with events and also promoting your downtown, they go so much hand in hand.
It's very cyclical. You have the event that draws the audience. You have the audience that wants to spend money. You need the physical building for the business to be in where the people can spend money, and just kind of that business then reinvests in the community. Another event comes along and everything benefits from everything. And it's just that we kind of see the buildings as another analogy is kind of the spine of the whole thing, that just keeps things in line and functioning well.
And if we haven't made the point enough yet, what we really want you to take away is that, without the continued effort, right, without maybe this design guidelines, or at least a discussion of saying, this is what our community is trying to do collectively. That kind of cycle that Scott was talking about, people, events, building, businesses, that can go forward and the momentum can continue, but it can also go backwards, right? So if your occupancy goes down, if you don't have the effort of people making programs and events downtown, if you don't maybe have collectively property owners having pride and investing in their buildings, that cycle can go backwards too. And that's obviously what we want to prevent happening. So design guidelines, how, what is the process to design guidelines? So we're kind of at the beginning of it. We've visited your community. We're still kind of absorbing and taking inventory of your specific buildings, and the things that those buildings have to bring to your downtown. And we're starting to engage and collaborate. So again, it's not me and Scott coming to your community and kind of taking a guideline document off the shelf and just changing the title to Spencer. It's getting to know the unique challenges, opportunities, wants, needs, wishes of your community, and baking that all into a document that is specific to you. And then how do you not just provide that document and have it sit somewhere, but how do you actually utilize that, Envision how you utilize that is, it's a document for current property owners. It's a document for a property owner 2 to 5 years into the future that is looking at, should I buy something downtown or out on the edge of town? What am I kind of getting myself into? What am I going to be a part of a collective effort? It's really a tool that you want to use once it's created. It's meant to be an active, engaging tool. And then the who, when, and where. Who, obviously, we want people to be involved. This isn't just us directing and kind of just designing something. It's engagement. When will this process happen, and when will you actually see these design guidelines that we speak of? So early next year is the process will lead us through that. It's a matter of kind of creating drafts, getting those approved, getting feedback, but early next year you should see something. And where, how might you access this document eventually? It's going to be a variety of places, right? We want it to be something that's accessible, easy to find, usable. So there'll be hard copies in your community, but also it'll be something that exists online that people can reference and get to easily. So this is not meant to overwhelm, but when we talk about what do these design guidelines actually look like, this is an example of this is actually half of the document of what we did for Newton, Iowa. But keep in mind that we wouldn't expect everyone to read these guidelines necessarily from front to back page, and everyone is going to use them a little bit different, but it is the collective kind of central collection of all the information that applies. So for instance, Newton's guidelines kind of went through some kind of historic information on their downtown just to give context and reference, talking about kind of the timeline of development and the different key, we talked about those key contributing structures, kind of calling some of those out, just to give people a general background to what we're saying is important and what the community is saying is important. Some references to standards of rehabilitation, which are kind of high-level principles that if you're embarking on a building project in a historic area, kind of some high-level guidelines, and then further break down to very specifics like facades. What are best practices with windows and storefronts and maintenance and cleaning of brick and material? So it's kind of spans the spectrum of high level information that maybe you're recruiting a business to town or to downtown and they might need some context just overall, but you may be a property owner that has a window project and you want to reference the specific information on that. It'll kind of be a collection of a lot of that information and people will use it in different ways. So again, this is just kind of a close-up of this was Newton's document, but their period of significance was mid-century modern, so the 50s and the 60s, and that's what their guidelines and their downtown was trying to protect. Yours is going to be different than that, so even how your guidelines look will be different. So speaking of your
I'm going to interject, one thing back. As you see how many pages this document may be, and some of the content that it has, and maybe Sharifa can kind of back me up on this. These aren't meant to be intimidating things. I think we're trying to really maybe ease that intimidation with, I don't even know where to start. This is now where you start. We've both been through project types where you could arm wrestle about window restoration versus window replacement, but these sorts of documents will kind of back up the right answer with experience. And these are not written in a way that your left brain or your right brain will explode. If you're a numbers person, this is not going to be foreign. Or, if you're, the more creative type, this isn't going to be kind of loose. It'll be clearly defined, concise, and we hope not intimidating, so it doesn't necessarily scare people away.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There'll be no quizzes or glossary of terms in here. It should be accessible to everyone. Again, when we talk about the guideline document and what that will mean to Spencer, I know we kind of chatted on our first community visit here, and just obviously our observation and very known that you have a large thoroughfare highway with truck and semi-traffic going through your downtown, which is a challenge, right? It's not maybe not happening in other communities, but it's certainly not happening in every downtown in Iowa, right? So it's your unique challenge. It was a question which I'm sure has come up many, many, many times is what can be done about this, right? What can be done about this somewhat noisy, fast, impactful traffic that is coming through our downtown. And I know, speaking with Robin, that there has been some conversations on that already. We actually did, just kind of as a first blush, reach out to IEDA to talk to them. Are there any other communities that we can learn from that overcame this, and what did they do, and where do we go from here? And the answer, just like everything in each community, is unique. There is no silver bullet, right? It would certainly be a challenge to, I think, just kind of high level. The idea was, can we move that route? Can we redesignate a route, at least to route the truck traffic around? The answer is yes or no. It depends on effort, joint community time, money, effort, but it's not an easy thing necessarily as far as just kind of putting up some signage, right, to route traffic around your downtown. You would really have to take the standards as far as materials, widths, maintenance, DOT of the road, and rebuild and reconstruct that on whatever your alternate route would be. So is it impossible? Nothing is impossible with the right amount of effort, time, and money, right? But I think just consider, as your community goes forward, is that effort something you want to continue talking about and maybe try to rally some momentum behind? Or, if it's not a deal breaker. You just have to see your downtown and its uniqueness and the challenges. Just like we're talking about all that pride of place, what is unique about your community? Well, maybe Spencer, maybe there's not a lot of restaurant eating right on Grand, but is your unique solution that you create pocket parks or side street access to people eating and engaging that is right off of Grand, that's something to consider. It's nothing to solve today or for us to solve, but I think we just want to kind of put that out there that we're quite aware of, right, that challenge that you have with the road, and maybe see it as, yes, a challenge, but how do you tackle that? If you can't outright move the route, there's other ways. Yeah, did you have a comment?
I do. I left the area for about 50 years now. I'm back. However, I've watched the city of Denison, Texas, addressing this issue with US Highway 75 and US Highway 69 both went through the old downtown. Both of them now go around, and downtown has essentially died. Because not only did you take the truck traffic away, you took the other traffic that you want away.
Yep.
So it's a double-edged sword, at least in my opinion, as to you take away one, the others, the car traffic is gonna go with the truck traffic because it's easy.
Yes, that's a very good point. Yep.
Impulse stop.
Right.
Yep. That's a very good point, and maybe to just summarize that in case the mic didn't pick that up, the gentleman in the audience has the point that, yes, if there's pros and cons, right, to any kind of change or solution. So rerouting would also potentially minimize exposure to your downtown because maybe traffic is just bypassing you completely. So again, nothing maybe to solve today, but it is an issue to keep talking about. But I think we could encourage that, each community only has so many resources, time, effort, energy, and is what do you want to put your resources behind?
I think, once you hear that opinion or that experience of Denison, Texas, then does that in a more timely fashion get Spencer to say, we're not going to focus our efforts, and this is hypothetical, we're not going to focus our efforts in relocating the highway. We're going to focus our efforts to how can we enhance other amenities downtown to get people maybe onto the side streets a little bit more with parklet parking, off of Grand that lets people carry out lunch from one of the restaurants and then just get around the corner and not feel threatened by, semis barreling down, over the lunch hour. So it's that conversation that happens in a community, whether we're part of that facilitation, or it happens after these guidelines are done. But like I said, it just kind of steers you to where does your focus create the most benefit.
And I think it's obvious that it's an issue for you because in that ranking, pedestrian experience I think was at the top of that list. So whether
I'm just curious how our beltway system plays into this particular conversation because I've only been here a few years, but the city put substantial work into creating the beltway system, worked with DOT, went out to DC to lobby for funding, and what I hear is why can't we get truck traffic to use that more frequently? So our lift might not be as heavy as a community that's maybe starting from scratch. So I guess I'd be looking for some guidance on how we can encourage utilization of that more than how do we just eliminate, Highway 71 running through downtown.
and we don't have an answer for you today, but that's something that you just want to continue that conversation. Yeah. Yeah. So people will, yeah, path of least resistance, most people will follow that. So that's a challenge. Yeah, so I think that's something to continue to look into as far as how this impacts, everything that you're trying to do in the downtown and how those conversations continue. Did anyone have any other insight or comments on this particular issue that they would like to share? Okay. All right. So,
She's letting me take this slide. So we've been saying the term design guidelines quite a bit through this presentation. To your understanding, are guidelines enforced by law? Yes, no, or option C? I guess this probably goes without a lot of other explanation. There are just guidelines at the basis of it, as far as a document to maybe guide someone in the right direction. Now, could an organization, whether that be local or county, have a funding source that says we're gonna create a pool of money of $250,000 for the next 5 years, and if people need to replace roofs or windows, let's say second story windows, and you apply for grant money to do that project, following the guidelines might be a restriction to that funding source. Go to an even higher level on the state level, even higher on the federal level. There will be rules and regulations to follow to execute the project to meet the requirements to receive the funding. But privately, a building owner or a property owner doesn't have to follow these, but we have seen, for the good of the whole, it's good to follow these. It's good for your building, it's good for the district that your building is in.
I think another point too is that the guidelines aren't meant to require people to spend more money than they would, right? It's more, sometimes that happens if you really want to fully take on like a restoration and do it completely authentically. Could that cost more than if you just kind of put some metal siding to cover up something? Sure, it might, but also there are ways that you can enhance your building historically accurate or historically sympathetically that don't have to cost more money. You just maybe need some guidance on what that avenue is, because some of these structures, materials, techniques sometimes require maybe more specialized contractors or specialists to help you with that, and it's just aligning with those people or aligning with the appropriate technique or material. That doesn't necessarily have to cost more. It's just maybe what wasn't front of mind or how things have been done in the past. So again, you're not required by law. The guidelines are not meant to make you spend more money. If you want access to some money, though, then yes, you might be required to follow those guidelines. So again, there's no straight silver bullet answer there, but it depends on who and how is using the guidelines and what kind of project you're taking on. So one last question I think we want to ask. Oh, this was yours. Do you want to? Okay. So again, just like the guideline document is unique to your community as far as how it looks and what it's trying to address, possible incentives that your local community might use to help reinforce use of the guidelines is also unique to your community. So community A might be really trying to fill second story storefronts with housing or do facade restorations. But here in Spencer, you might be trying to tackle different things when it comes to your downtown restoration, preservation. So this is just a free form field that you can fill in from your perspective, whether you're a business owner, building owner, city entity. What do you think are maybe some things that Spencer City of or county could explore as monetary incentives to help entice people to follow historic guidelines? What is the need maybe specifically that you see?
This is an incredibly common hurdle for a lot of communities, and how to maximize the how to just occupy 100% of the volume, and code enforcement of those properties. And I think some of the these second floor access, second floor housing, does it have to be sprinkled? Is the investment of a sprinkler system a deal breaker for a building owner? It can be, right? Depending on your building size, it can be. Is the infrastructure there to support the water, for the system? These are the kinds of things that we're thinking. We just kind of want to get an idea of, or we're going to give you ideas of what programs could be set up for a period of time that are supplemented by local entities to achieve some of these things. So, you want to rehab second floor into residential units, but it wasn't residential before, so now it has to be sprinkled. But that sprinkler system is going to cost you $40,000. Well, or $50,000 or $60,000. An obstacle we're fighting in our own building. We've got 10,000 square feet on second floor. People would love to live up there. It's not sprinkled. And we don't have the cash laying around to just put one in just in case. But if there's a project or a plan in place where an owner is going to inject X amount of dollars into the rehabilitation of the second floor, then another entity locally can support that project with X amount of dollars to go toward a component of that. So, like I said, sometimes it's water supply into the building, sometimes it's sewer getting out of the building, stairways, elevators, those sorts of things are kind of a, yep. We've seen communities, I don't know, this lower interest-free loans for restoration within guideline definitions. Grundy Center has what they call a big loan program. Building improvement grant might be what the acronym is. And there's smaller loans that are funded by the city of Grundy Center. And those loans then do a project that follow the guidelines that Grundy Center has established. Lost.
Yeah, I think too, just to yes, yep, these are great. And I think just to reiterate it sounds pretty basic, like, well, there's not stairs in this building, or there's not an elevator or a sprinkler system. That we've seen, even with clientele that are looking to move into buildings down in downtowns, that's the deal breaker for them to do their project outright. Maybe not even just should I do it downtown, or should I just go on the edge of town where I don't have to worry about a stair. Sometimes just the cost of that infrastructure is kind of just stops the project momentum in their tracks, because it's just kind of an overwhelming cost. So when we talk about what could be specific incentives to guidelines, if this time and time again is coming up in your community that this maybe infrastructure is a barrier, then that's something for your community to look at. And then, it's really about trying to make the guidelines as effective and useful as possible in kind of moving things forward with money and incentives, right? So yeah, all of these are really great ones.
We bought a building without access to second floor. It has a metal staircase, fire escape, full stair from second floor. That's the only way to get to second floor. Some people, I think we have, we're kind of in this creative field where we can imagine what the staircase is going to look like and how the elevator shaft is going to fit in. But attracting a tenant to a space when they have to climb up the fire escape to see it it's a roadblock, and so we look at local funding sources, matching grants, even on the state level for ways that can just kind of ease that initial burden so people can see what it's like to go upstairs and maybe imagine it a little better than seeing just a brick wall. Right.
There was one on here that was, I think, a misconception about parking availability. Is that, I don't know if someone wants to expand on that, if you're comfortable or not. Is that an issue? Is that okay? Okay.
Sorry, I think we make the assumption that upper story living will prohibit parking without actually verifying that that's the reality of it. There are a lot of public parking spaces downtown and a lot of public parking lots that are empty a lot of the time. And I think we can be creative about how those spaces are used. But I think we use it as a crutch to not invest in upper story living as well. Where are people going to park? Wow.
Yeah,
Plenty of parking.
there's a balance to strike between landlord and city and tenant parking until 7:30 a.m. And then the business opens and other people occupy that parking, and then people leave and go to work. They're gonna they might be driving out of Spencer to go to work. So I think it's a valid point, and you always wonder that when a building doesn't have private parking, what's that ripple effect gonna be?
Yeah, well, I can speak directly to this, because I own a building and actually live in the building on the second floor. And yes, we have a little parking lot, public parking lot that abuts two sides of my building. City street and the alley abuts the other side. So I've got no space for any private parking. Most of the time it's not an issue. But for example, when there are special events that go on, or No Boundaries, before they moved over here, they were across the street. So during school hours, there was no parking in that area. And so, when you say there's plenty of parking, on some, I will agree that probably on the east side, that's a true story. On the west side of Grand, there's a lot more business and a lot less public parking. For example, by the Arnold building, which is kitty corner across the street from it, that lot is designated private parking only. Now granted, it may be private owned, so when you say there's plenty of parking downtown, you have to rethink, and I have apartments available in my building as well as businesses. And so, what I'm saying is I have parking and residence on the upper floor, or the business on the ground floor, residence on the upper floor. And in that process, if the residents and the businesses don't think they've got parking, it makes it harder for me to get tenants in those spaces. And I'm sure I'm not the only building owner that has those similar kinds of questions, and it's not everywhere. But there are isolated places where that is going on. I mean, across the street from me, there's the Farmers Bank. There again, a private parking lot. So there are issues, and like you say, there's no silver bullet, but it's not universal.
Yeah, and I will admit guilt to this. It's okay to walk an extra block. I don't have to park right in front. I like to park right in front sometimes, but I think society has just gotten very used to being able to park as close as possible. And this kind of harkens back to that pedestrian friendly, sort of desire or maintenance, that we want to keep. So whether it's solved by limited hours, public, there are a lot of, I don't know, algorithms or, solutions to kind of lessen that issue.
I think too, again, all these points are valid, relevant, kind of universal, right, challenges to a lot of towns. So I think another perspective to that too is, thinking about the power or the approach to marketing maybe your properties or your available properties, especially residential, the role that takes. Again, not the same people aren't looking for the same thing, but some people that maybe are looking for downtown living are coming to the table expecting a little bit, like I'm not going to have a front yard. I might have to walk my groceries a little bit to my building. If that maybe a little bit more urban experience is articulated and marketed from the perspective of those properties, and not kind of maybe assuming that people are expecting the same experience downtown residentially as they are with a down the block in a house where they have parking right in front of it. Certainly some people are, but maybe can you tap into the people that are looking for and maybe willing to compromise for more of an urban type experience in your downtown. So again, nothing to necessarily solve right now, but I think thinking about the way that you talk about your properties and maybe don't sell them short is also kind of part of the puzzle too. So all great points, and a main takeaway of that is that every kind of, I think, approach doesn't blanketly apply to every property within the district, certainly. All good comments. I think we're just about, I think we're wrapping it up here. If we'll open it up at the end, if anyone has any other points to make, that's great. I think just one more point we wanted to make is to kind of set the expectation of kind of the process. So we talked about delivery of these guideline documents early into next year, what that looks like. We're kind of right here at this early stage of community engagement and input. A next step for us is really to start kind of just drafting and formulating what some of the information that these guidelines might be. And then there'll be a period of time where SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, needs to review that. We'll certainly want community feedback on those guidelines, which will then allow us to refine a final document. And then after that, of course, is implementation in your community. So kind of expect those next steps, but we're still kind of early in the process right now. So we don't want to sell anyone short if they had any other comments. Is there any other questions or comments? I know that was a lot of information, but hopefully you got some value out of that. Everyone's ready to go home and talk to their friends and family about design guidelines. Nothing else?
Yeah, I think the important thing, to take away as you absorb some of this information tonight is we're doing this again. We'll be reviewing the draft to kind of show you the content and start to explain things more specifically. But but don't hesitate to ask questions between now and then, or save them for our next visit, because it'll be a lot of the same thing. We might have some more polling questions within the presentation to gather even more specifics, but ultimately we want this to be your document, so it's a value to everyone within the district. So if there are no more questions or comments, I want to thank everybody for being here and participating in the questions. It's very helpful for us to cater the information and put a little effort into maybe some voids if we see any. So thank you for taking almost an hour and a half of your time to help out with this. We kind of love these projects, where we get to, be in the car for a little bit and then get to go explore another community. So it's, I think they're fun for us.